Did you know that the most terrifying secrets are often kept not by strangers, but by the people you wave to every morning? What if the beautiful Green Mountains of Vermont, a place known for peace and quiet, held the darkest secret for 25 years, and the man who everyone trusted was the one holding the shovel? Welcome to Detected Cold Cases, your daily dive into the world of unsolved mysteries, forgotten crimes, and chilling cases that still haunt investigators. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new revelation. This is the story of David and Alex Holloway, a father and son who vanished into thin air in the summer of 1995 from the sleepy capital city of Montpelier. It's a story that went cold, leaving a hole in a community and a mother in endless agony, until a detective named Storm dug up a haunting truth that led to an arrest that made the entire state of Vermont gasp. Stick with me, because the details of this discovery, the things found after 2 decades of silence, are going to shake you. And by the end, you're going to realize that sometimes the monster isn't under the bed, it's sitting next to you at the town meeting. And if you find stories like this as chilling as I do me a huge favor. Tap that like button and subscribe, because every week we dive into the chilling cases where justice was delayed, but never denied. Let's get into it. I want you to picture Montpelier, Vermont, in 1995. It's not a big city. It's more like a very large, picturesque town, surrounded by these deep green hills and forests. The kind of place where people don't lock their doors, where everyone knows your name, and where the biggest drama is usually who won the annual town bake-off. That's where David Holloway, a 8-year-old carpenter known for his booming laugh, lived with his wife, Eleanor, and their 10-year-old son, Alex. Alex, he was all freckles and elbows, a kid who loved his baseball glove more than television. David and Alex, they were a unit. David would sneak him out of bed on summer nights to look at the stars, and Alex was David's best helper on all his building projects. Their bond was something everyone in their small circle admired. The last time anyone saw them was Labor Day weekend, September 2nd, 1995. It was a beautiful Saturday morning. David and Alex were getting ready for what was supposed to be a simple one-night camping and fishing trip. Nothing major. They were just heading up towards a secluded spot near the Winooski River, maybe an hour outside of town. A spot David used to go to when he was a boy. Eleanor, Alex's mother, packed them sandwiches David's favorite, turkey and Swiss, and a thermos of hot cocoa for Alex. She gave David a quick kiss and told Alex to remember his bug spray. David promised to be back before dinner on Sunday. That was the agreement. A solid agreement from a solid man. David Holloway was known for being on time. He was reliable. If he said he'd be back by 6, you could set your watch to it. But 6 o'clock Sunday came and went. Then 8 o'clock. Then midnight. Eleanor tried calling David's old clunky mobile phone, the kind that barely got a signal outside of the city, but it just went straight to voicemail. She wasn't worried yet. Not truly worried. She told herself that maybe the truck broke down, or maybe they found a perfect fishing spot and just decided to stay an extra night. This is what we all do, right? We make up logical reasons for the delay, because the truth, the dark, chilling truth, is too big to face right away. By Monday morning, when David hadn't shown up for his construction job and Alex hadn't appeared in his 5th-grade classroom, the quiet worry exploded into full-blown panic. Eleanor called the police. Now, remember what I told you about Montpelier? Small town. The local police were used to dealing with lost dogs and speeding tickets, not double disappearances. They initially brushed it off. It's the woods, ma'am. People lose track of time. They'll walk out when they're ready. But Eleanor? She knew David. She kept pushing, and finally, a search was organized. 2 days after they were supposed to return, the faded blue Ford pickup truck they had taken was found. Where was it? Not stuck in a ditch. Not crashed. It was parked at a rarely used trailhead off Route 14, just past the edge of the state forest boundary. Neatly parked, as if David had just stepped out for a moment. But here's where the chills start to set in. The doors were unlocked. The keys were hanging in the ignition. Inside the truck, everything was there. Alex's backpack with his comic books, David's wallet with all his cash, and the half-eaten sandwiches Eleanor had made. The only things missing were David's fishing rod, Alex's little tackle box, and the two of them. They were just gone. The initial search was massive. State troopers, the National Guard, hundreds of volunteers. They combed the dense woods for miles. Search dogs sniffed the area, but the scent trail went cold almost immediately, as if the forest floor had swallowed their smell. They searched the river, dragged the deepest pools, and nothing. No torn clothes, no footprints, no sign of struggle, no emergency fire pit, no evidence of a sudden accident, nothing to show that two people who knew the woods, who were prepared for a simple overnight trip, had met with any kind of natural disaster. It was as if they had simply stepped out of the truck and ceased to exist. This complete lack of evidence is what makes a cold case so brutal. If you find a body, you have a murder investigation. If you find a crash site, you have an accident. But when you find an empty car with the keys in the ignition and the lunch still inside, your mind goes to the most unsettling places. Did they run away? No. David and Alex were too close to Eleanor. Was it a kidnapping? Possible. But why leave the wallet and the valuable truck? For months, Eleanor Holloway walked around like a ghost. She was constantly on the phone, organizing searches, taping up flyers with their faces on every lamppost in Vermont. The community supported her, but as weeks turned into months, the search teams went home. The volunteers stopped calling, and the flyers began to peel away from the wood. The case went cold, shelved in a dusty filing cabinet under Missing Persons Foul Play Unconfirmed. Now, let's jump forward 25 years. We are now in the year 2020. 25 years of anniversaries, birthdays, and holidays spent staring at two empty chairs at the dinner table. Eleanor Holloway still lived in the same house in Montpelier. She still kept Alex's room exactly as he left it. The baseball poster slightly peeling from the wall, his favorite dinosaur toys on the bookshelf. She never moved. She never remarried. She waited. And in the world of cold cases, that waiting, that refusal to give up, sometimes keeps the light on just long enough for someone new to see it. That someone was Detective Thomas Rourke, but everyone just called him Storm. Detective Storm Rourke. He wasn't a young hotshot, but a seasoned investigator. He had that kind of quiet, patient energy you see in people who have spent their lives looking for things that don't want to be found. He'd been assigned to the Vermont State Police's cold case unit, and he pulled the Holloway file one quiet Tuesday morning. He wanted a challenge, and this case, with its perfect lack of clues, was a wall of silence. Storm started from the beginning. He didn't focus on the woods, he focused on the people who had been overlooked in the initial chaos of 1995. He read the original reports over and over. He looked at the grainy photos of the truck. He looked at the list of people interviewed, all the usual suspects, family members, co-workers, distant friends, all cleared. But then he found a small detail, a tiny thread of loose information that had been dismissed by the original investigators. It was a note from a neighbor, a simple statement that they had seen someone near the truck on Sunday night, hours after David and Alex were supposed to be home. The neighbor, an elderly man who has long since passed away, described a dark green vehicle, not David's blue pickup, pulling away quickly from the area. Storm saw this and thought, why was this detail ignored? In 1995, the theory was they walked away and got lost. A random green car was seen as irrelevant, but Storm knew better. A disappearance this clean, this total, is rarely the work of the wilderness. It's the work of a person, a quick, calculated action. He spent weeks tracking down every dark green car registered in Montpelier in 1995. A massive, tedious task without modern computer systems. But he found a short list. One name on that list kept coming up in the original police reports as a friend of David's: George Miller. Now, George Miller, who was he? He was the opposite of a suspect. George was the heart of the community. He ran the local hardware store. He was the scoutmaster for Alex's troop. He helped organize the annual food drive. He was the kind of man who would stop everything to help you fix a flat tire on the side of the road. People called him the Quiet, not because he was unfriendly, but because he was so steady, so predictable, a pillar of the town. He was the one who consoled Eleanor Holloway the most in 1995, the one who helped organize the initial search efforts. He even spoke at the community memorial service, tears in his eyes, as he talked about David's character. When Storm brought George Miller in for a quiet, friendly chat, George was calm, too calm. He expressed sympathy for Eleanor, said he was happy the police were still trying. When Storm asked about the dark green sedan he drove back then, George smiled and said, "Oh, that old thing? I sold that junker in '96. Needed the money for the hardware store expansion, you know." He claimed he wasn't near the trailhead that weekend. He said he was helping his wife paint the garage. A perfect, simple alibi. But Storm didn't buy it. He had a feeling, a cold, hard knot in his gut, that the key to this 5-year-old mystery was sitting right in front of him, trying to hide behind a mask of small-town goodness. Storm knew he needed a physical lead, a piece of evidence that could connect the quiet, dependable George Miller to the disappearance. The original investigation was sloppy, focused too much on the woods. Storm had a hunch. He went back to the old, archived case files, the physical boxes of evidence that had sat in storage for decades. He was looking for anything related to George Miller, and he found a single, small item, an old shovel. This was a regular, unremarkable shovel found a week after the disappearance, tossed into a public dumpster behind the Montpelier Community Center. It had a wooden handle, a flat head, and was caked with old, dried mud. It was logged in the evidence room in 1995, but quickly dismissed. Why? Because hundreds of people use shovels in Vermont. It had no identifying marks. But Storm looked at the chemical analysis report from 1995 that he had requested to be rerun with modern forensic technology. The 1995 test only looked for human blood. The test came back negative. But the 2020 retest of the dirt residue on the shovel, using advanced soil and mineral analysis, came back with a hit that stopped Storm's breath. The dirt on the shovel wasn't generic forest soil. It was a very specific, rare type of clay and limestone mixture that was only found in one small, unique depression near the river, a location that was 2 miles outside of the main search perimeter in 1995, and critically, a location George Miller owned. George Miller, the beloved scoutmaster and hardware store owner, he owned a small, private, undeveloped plot of land near the river, a place no one would ever think to search, because why would David and Alex be there? It was a place David would never have gone to fish. It was too swampy, too difficult to access. This was the lead. This was the opening. Storm got a warrant. You have to understand. The town of Montpelier was buzzing when they saw the state police cars pull up to George Miller's house and his property. People were lining the street, whispering, "George? No way. Not George." They thought it was a mistake. They thought the police were harassing a good man. But Storm, he ignored them all. He drove straight to the secluded, privately owned property near the river. The search of George Miller's land began on a cold, misty October morning in 2020, the kind of day where the air itself feels heavy and sorrowful. They used ground-penetrating radar on the swampy, uneven ground, and almost immediately, the radar specialist, a young, nervous woman, shouted out. She had found 2 large, dense, unnatural masses buried close together, deep under the thick earth. Storm stood there, watching the team work. He watched the earth mover bite into the soil, slowly pulling back decades of growth. The smell of cold earth and wet leaves filled the air. You can imagine the tension, the silence broken only by the engine of the digger. 25 years of silence, about to be shattered. What they found, after hours of painstaking work, wasn't what they expected. They didn't find bodies right away. They found a shallow, almost forgotten structure, a wooden box, something that looked like a rough, hand-built storage crate, just large enough for a person to crawl into. It was rotted, but it was unmistakably man-made. And next to it, the second mass that the radar detected was a larger, more solid area of recently compacted earth. The box, that small, rotten structure it was, the first truly haunting discovery. Inside, covered in mold and decay, they found a small, dusty pair of shoes, Alex's size, and a child's red and blue flannel shirt, the exact one Eleanor Holloway had identified Alex wearing that day. It was a tiny, devastating time capsule. But the way they were found, tucked into a box, wasn't consistent with a struggle or a quick burial. It felt purposeful, almost staged, like someone wanted to hide the clothes, but not the bodies. Then they moved to the second, larger mass. The police had to use hand shovels now, carefully, slowly. The ground was much tougher here, and that's when they found them. Not inside the box, but about 10 feet away, deeper down, covered by the compacted earth. It was David and Alex Holloway. The way they were found told a story all its own. David was huddled over Alex, his arms draped protectively around his son, even in death. It wasn't an accident. They hadn't died of exposure. The forensic team later confirmed that both had been killed quickly and brutally, with a blunt object, and then hastily buried. It was an act of violence, not a tragedy of the wilderness. They had been killed at the trailhead, or very near it, and then driven to this private spot, George Miller's land, for burial. That dark green sedan the neighbor saw? It wasn't irrelevant. It was the murder weapon's getaway car. The evidence was overwhelming. The soil from George Miller's shovel, tested again, matched the unique soil from the burial site perfectly. A search of George's old files he had kept in his hardware store basement, uncovered a deed for the land, along with a crude, hand-drawn map of the property, with an X marking the swampy depression where the bodies were found. But the final, most damning piece of evidence came from Eleanor Holloway herself. When Detective Storm brought her the flannel shirt and the shoes, she was overwhelmed with grief. But in her pain, she remembered something vital about David. David was a carpenter, a craftsman. On the cuff of his shirt, David had sewn his initials, D.H., in tiny, almost invisible black thread, a habit from his father to keep his expensive work shirts from getting lost at the dry cleaner. Storm hadn't noticed it, but Eleanor did. She had told David off for wasting his time on such a small, silly detail. Now, she was thankful for it. The shirts David was wearing were gone, decayed, but the one they found in the box, the child's flannel, Storm had it tested. Tucked into the collar, a single, tiny black thread was found, a type of thread David, the carpenter, used to mark his tools. It was a tiny piece of physical evidence linking David's presence to the final act of hiding the body, suggesting he may have been forced to undress his son before they were both killed. The box was for the clothes. The shovel was for the hole. But why? Why would George Miller, the beloved scoutmaster, kill his friend David and his 10-year-old son Alex? This is the part that truly shocked the community. It wasn't a random fit of rage. It wasn't an argument over property. It was money, debt, and a secret life. David Holloway, the reliable carpenter, had loaned George Miller a significant amount of money, a very large loan that George needed to expand his hardware store. David hadn't told Eleanor because he didn't want to worry her. George was supposed to pay it back by Labor Day. George couldn't. He was close to bankruptcy. David had given him an ultimatum. Pay me back by Sunday, or I have to tell Eleanor and the bank, which would have ruined George's reputation and his business. George, desperate, had arranged to meet David at the trailhead that Sunday night, claiming he had the cash. David brought Alex, expecting a quick exchange, a drive home, and a late dinner. When David realized George had lied, an argument broke out. George, in his panic and fear of being exposed, grabbed the first blunt object he could find, the shovel he used for his gardening, and ended the lives of his friend and the little boy he was supposed to mentor. The arrest of George Miller was the final, devastating blow to the town of Montpelier. It happened on a Thursday morning, right as he was unlocking the door to his hardware store. The sirens, the handcuffs, the sight of George Miller, the quiet, being led away by Detective Storm Rourke, it shattered the peaceful image of their town. People stood on the sidewalks, weeping, not just for the horror of the crime, but for the realization that for 25 years, the man who comforted the widow was the man who made her a widow. The man who sat on the town council was a killer. The trust was gone. Detective Storm Rourke, he didn't seek the spotlight. When the press descended on Montpelier, he simply said, "Sometimes you just need to follow the thread that everyone else dropped." He understood that the most compelling pieces of evidence are often the ones that seem too small to matter. The shovel, the specific type of dirt, the forgotten thread, they were all screaming the truth, but it took 25 years and a patient man to finally hear them. Eleanor Holloway, she finally had peace. A brutal, agonizing kind of peace, but closure nonetheless. She buried David and Alex, finally, with dignity, two simple white caskets, side by side, near the river they loved, but far away from the dark place where they were hidden. The community never fully recovered its innocence, and perhaps it never should. The story of David and Alex Holloway is a permanent scar on the Green Mountains, a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask of hatred. Sometimes it wears the mask of a friendly neighbor. And that brings us to the end of this devastating story. Before you click away, I want you to think about what you've just heard. Think about the people in your life, the ones you trust the most. Are you sure you know their secrets? Are you sure you know what they're truly capable of? It's a terrifying question, and it's why we keep talking about these cold cases, so they never truly go cold again. If this story stuck with you, if it gave you chills, do me a huge favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story of justice, and hit that subscribe button to join our community. Your support keeps me digging for the truth in the darkest corners. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.